Hello and welcome to BusyWorksBeats.com. Today we're excited to bring you a new series called the FL Studio 12 Week, and this week is going to be called Fleek FL Week. In this week, we're going to go over FL Studio 12, all the new features, and 5 easy steps to understanding the software and how to use it. So we're starting from the desktop today because I want to show you things straight from the gate. You know, this is going to be a video about how to understand the program right away, what you need to know. It's not going to be about every little thing about the program, okay? So that's the difference between this video and different videos. So before we start, let's just keep in mind that we have an open window over here with our product from BusyWorksBeats.com called the Ultimate Producer Bundle 2. I'm going to show you how to actually use a new function in FL Studio 12. So I got to remind myself that I have that open, because once we have that window open, we can drag audio files into FL Studio. So before we jump the gun, let's open FL Studio 12. As you can see, a quicker loading time, okay? So it loads up extremely fast. And here's what you're gonna see. So this is what I want you to understand, okay? Now we're gonna break down FL Studio 12 into 5 easy steps. And those 5 easy steps, we're always gonna refer to these 5 buttons. Now they used to be separate, so it was a little easier to understand before, but they're still in the same spot. So if you look in your top right corner, before you get into anything, you want to get familiar with these 5 buttons. These 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 buttons. These 3 you don't have to worry about as much. Only these 5 buttons here. That's all you have to remember, really, to get around FL Studio 12, because it's designed to help you pull up things when you need it and put away things when you don't need them. Okay, so those are the 5 buttons you need to remember to click on to navigate your way through the program. Now let's first start with what's called the browser. Okay, FL Studio has a place where you can import sounds, a place where you can organize files, and even access your sampled material. So if you look here on the left side, and also in the top left, you'll have your username from the website, and once you register your product. Okay, so that's what the view is. So before you get confused trying to look around and understand everything, let's start with these 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 buttons. Now I'm not going to go in order of these 5 buttons. We're going to start first with this button here. If I left click on it, it's called the browser. I can open and close the browser. So before we jump into anything, we're going to start with the browser, because this is where it all starts. The browser begins your beat creation. Okay, sound selection is how you start your beat. You need sounds to create songs, and you have to pick the sounds properly first. So I'm going to show you how to properly pick your sounds before you get into the beat making process. Okay, because we're going to go through the steps of the beat making process as we go through the program, so you're not overwhelmingly taken in FL Studio 12. And then we're going to go over the settings after the browser. Okay, so the browser is just one big organizing tool for you to understand where your sounds are, whether you have drum kits, whether you have samples, or whether you have products that you want to import into FL Studio 12. I'm going to show you how to navigate around the browser. First place you want to look for people who are just trying to get your beat started right away is under packs, because packs are pre-installed sounds from ImageLine, gracefully helping you start your beat. Okay, so let's go to packs, and we can open up drums, we can open up instruments, we can open up the older sounds that they had in their previous editions of FL Studio. We can open up loops, sound effects, shapes for different synthesizers, and even vocal tracks. Okay, so they have it laid out for you, a quick start, basically completing your first song. So let's go over some search functions, because we're not going to go through each of these sounds, but a quick way to go through your browser is just click on things, and when it has a drop down, you can click that arrow here to close it back up or collapse the structure. And there's also a quick collapse button. Let's say you have all these, sorry about that. Let's say you have all these folders open, and you're like, wow, it's getting a little tedious going through all these folders. Oh, actually, they even made it simpler. So before, when you open up multiple folders, there would be, like you see here, all these options for a snare. Let's say I had the kick folder open. It would also have the kicks, and it would be a long list of kicks and long list of snares, and you had to scroll your way back up. And to quickly declutter and reset the browser, you just want to click this up arrow, which is the collapse structure. And what that's going to do is close all your open folders to help you get back to the original browser view. So when you get confused, remember to click that collapse button to, declutter. Okay, so let's say you're looking for a sound, a particular sound in the browser. Let's say I'm going to let you investigate and discover what's in the packs because they have some great sounds for you to start off. Okay, but what we're going to do is, let's say you have a sound in mind and you just want to see if it's in the packs area or in the area itself. So let's say you want to search. You can right click, okay, and smart find in this folder. Now you can also check every one of these folders that are registered into your browser by clicking the search button here. That's newly added, I believe. And you can type in, let's say, guitar. Okay, so it's going to take its time and go through each of the guitars. Now the question is, okay, it found the first instance of a guitar, but how do we get to the next instance of a guitar, whether that's a synth or whatever sound it may be? Now we can hit the keys F2 and F3 to cycle through these sounds. So if I hit F3, it's going to take me to the next sound down. If I hit F2, it's going to take me back to the original Electro Guitar 3000. And I can actually do it back further. So if I hit F2 now, it's going to take me to the very last option that we have in our browser. And if I hit F2, we can cycle through all the different options that say guitar, that are labeled with guitar. So that's a really quick way in searching all your folders. But let's say you know you have a guitar sound in a specific folder, like the packs, for instance. We can right click packs and smart find in this folder, meaning only that folder instead of all the sounds. Because over time, when you build your drum libraries and build your sample libraries, you're gonna have a lot of kits. And instead of searching all your kits, you can search a particular kit. And this is the quick way to do it. So again, we're gonna right click, smart find in this folder, and then type in guitar and hit enter. It's gonna pull up guitar. Okay, now when we hit F3, it's gonna cycle through all the different options for guitar, and F2 goes backwards. Okay, so that's your first tip in cycling through the browser, because this will help you get to the sounds you're looking for. What happens is when we first start in the browser, we try to find sounds and we go through random sounds that aren't necessarily what we're looking for, and then we get really confused on how to put a beat together. So first start out with what you want to hear first, and if you can't find it, search for something else similar, okay, so that you can get the sounds you want easier that way. And it saves you a lot of time and a lot of frustration when you're getting into your beat, because sound selection is key in any beat. Okay, so let's look at the organization of the browser. Now this is a new browser organization because now they have tabs at the top, similar to Bitwig. Okay, you have tabs. You have the All tab, you have the Current Project tab, which is very important for those trying to correct different errors that they made with different things. More of an advanced feature, but it's also in the All function, or the All browser, under Current Project. Okay, so it's still there, but they have it separated so that you can easily find it there. Okay, and also they have the plugin database, which is all their plugins inside of a folder in the directory. So when you installed FL Studio, under program files, image line / data / whatever, that folder has these listed plugins. Okay, so if your plugins aren't installed into that specific directory folder, I'm going to show you how to install your plugins using a third-party location. So before we get into all that confusing talk, this is where you can pick plugins if you like the visual way to pick plugins. You're most likely not going to use this unless you're really a visual person. For those who are kind of upgrading to FL12, those plugins are now in the add button up here. Instead of channels, it's add channel, and you can add the plugin that way. And we'll get into that when we get into the step sequencer, which is next. Okay, so don't get overwhelmed. We're going piece by piece through FL12 to make it easier for you, because it's really breaks down to 5 easy steps. Okay, and remember, if you ever get lost, there are 5 buttons up here that'll help you navigate through the whole program. You won't get lost that way. Okay, so let's move on to adding a folder to the browser. So this is when you want to import drum kits or import different sound libraries into FL Studio 12. And then next, I'm going to show you how to drag different files from your window. Well, actually, before we get to that, that's going to be in the playlist. So I wrote that as the wrong note. We're going to move that to the playlist section. So that's down the line. And then we're going to show you how to work through the new system. Okay, so let's try to add a folder into our browser. to add things, we're going to go to options. We're going to go to project settings. We're going to go to the file tab. Okay. And here's where we're going to manage our files. Okay. You can see external tools, browser extra search folders, which are extra folders here. Okay. So the browser, we can import different drum kits, and you can see an imported folder that they gave you, I guess, for reference is the IL shared data folder. So this is the folder added, and you can see there's a little folder and a plus. This means it's an added folder. Okay. Or it's a, labeled that way, I guess, to help us. Usually it was in green before in FL Studio 11 to let you know that you added it. I see it down here as well. So that's an added folder, I guess, as well, technically. So whenever you see a folder and a plus, that means you added it to your browser. Okay, so to add folders to your browser, we're going to simply click on the folder button, and you want to navigate through your different folders. So let's say you want to import a folder from busyworksbeats.com. Okay, let's X out real quick. Click on here, that folder button, go to your computer or wherever the sounds are stored. Click on your devices. We're going to go into drum kits. Actually, that's not even where the kit is. Where am I going? Let's go to products, and let's go to, let's see, what do we want to add to our folder? Let's do the Ultimate Producer Bundle 2 from busyworksbeats.com. And let's go to Fire Drum Kit, which is going to be a free download in the link below. So you get freebies for watching this video. So congrats. We're going to click on the Fire Drum Kit, hit OK. And now that folder has been added to the browser. You can see over here, it's now newly added to the browser. Now what you want to do, or what you can do, is also rename the folder. So you see this column here that says browser name. We can double click this and give that specific folder a name. It's already named the folder. So that's Fire Drum Kit. But if you have it named XZYZ, whatever, you want to rename that folder to Fire Drum Kit. Let's just put Busyworks Beats or something. Okay, so you can see the difference. And when we hit enter or click out, it's not going to update right away. Okay, you have to reread your structure. This is like a refresh button. Whenever you add sounds to your browser, just like we can collapse the folders to close all the open folders, we can refresh or reread the structure, which is going to refresh what we added using the browser extra folders. So let's reread. Okay, so now it says Fire Drum Kit Busyworks Beats. All right, and that's going to be the updated stuff that you do when you import folders. Now, what we want to get across is the settings. So let's go across these settings. So if you have a MIDI controller, if you don't know what a MIDI controller is, MIDI, keyboard or controller, you want to look into different MIDI controllers because that'll help you make songs a lot easier. Okay, more realistic as well. But this is very easy and straightforward, similar to Bitwig and other they kind of redid the interface, which is good. So we're going to click on MIDI tab, and we're going to activate our MIDI controller by clicking on it and then hitting enable. Okay, so we're going to enable our complete control, which is our MIDI controller. And that's all you have to do. You don't have to worry about all this extra setting stuff unless you're into the more advanced uses of a MIDI controller. Now, once it's enabled, we're going to get into different tabs. So let's go to the audio tab. Now you can see here under audio tab, we have what's called the device. This is going to be basically where you choose your audio interface. And we have a video going over the essential equipment. We'll leave a link below. It's called the Home Studio Tour for Musical Composers, and we'll leave a link below. But anyway, we go over the things you need basically to get started. And one of those is an audio interface. So you can see here our Focusrite audio interface is under the ASIO drivers or devices. Okay, so you can select different audio interfaces. So what does that mean? It means when you're making songs and you're making the beat, you want to be under ASIO for all. Not only will it give you a clearer, crisper sound, it'll also let you record your audio like a microphone or any audio input. Okay, so that's what you want to do to record audio and to get a crisper sound, and it's going to make your beat sound a lot better. If you're under primary sound driver, that's more for video recordings and other things that you need, just general stuff. So you generally don't have primary sound driver on. Okay. Now, when you have an audio interface, which is a piece of equipment, hardware that you buy at the store, you'll see under ASIO devices, we have you have your brand of audio interface that you can click to activate. And then you also have what's called a line out in this case, which is similar to a primary sound driver, but it's just a lower latency or a higher latency function of the same audio interface. So if you don't understand that, it's fine. Just use Audio for All driver. Okay, you'll be fine. Now from there, we have what's called the buffer length. Okay, so the buffer length is basically how quick the computer reads audio. If you have it very high, like 93, the computer is going to slowly read the audio. So your beat is going to sound very smooth and not hard and not very sharp. But the lower you pull your buffer length, the sharper your beat's going to sound. But you may also get what's called clicks and artifacts, which are just noises created because the computer can't keep up with the audio basically. So your buffer length will help you navigate through that. Now, when you have the Audio driver on, okay, you can click the Show Audio panel and do the same thing. Okay, we see here, your buffer size. You can lower that or increase that. So it's the same thing. Let's click out of that. Let's go back to primary. Well, we weren't on primary. Let's go to line out in this case. We're going to put this down to 43. In a different video, we're going to show you how to create a beat in FL Studio 12. So this video is more about the technical side, what you need to know, what you don't need to know to help you get started and set up correctly to move on to the next section. So once you understand these 5 easy steps, you're going to be able to navigate quickly in the beat making session video. Okay, so everything's set here. You don't really need to mess with a lot of this. We'll get into that in a different video. So under general, again, options you don't really have to mess with. File, we showed you how to import your drum kits and how to import sounds from third-party companies into FL Studio. And here's where people ask, where do you install your plugins? So where you install your plugins is in a defined folder. So when you have, let's say if you're on PC, your C drive, okay, your computer / program files, and then / VST plugins. Okay, that's the 64-bit program files itself is 64-bit. If you go to program files x86, that is the 32-bit. Okay, so that's a lower bit rate. And it makes a difference when you're installing different plugins. And those are 2 different directories. We have a video on how to install plugins. We're not going to get into that in this video, but here's where you would pick your extra search folder for those third-party plugins. So if you want to have third-party plugins, you have to click File, click on that folder, find the folder where you install all your plugins, and it'll pull it into FL Studio 12. So continuing the tabs, let's go to the Project tab. So here's where you pretty much don't touch this. Let's see under Advanced. You pretty much don't touch this tab too much unless you want to be like Pro Tools and create a data folder, which a lot of people skip, which is fine. You can go to Info. Here's where you're going to basically see how much time you spent on your file when the project was started. And here's where you add your info. So your title of your track, you're the author, so whatever your company name is, whatever genre, they even have a list of genres for you. And then you have comments for the metadata, and then you have the web link, which will show up in FL Studio 12. If anybody opens up the FLP, they can see that web link displayed. And you can even reset your working time so that, let's say your file didn't really take 16 minutes, you can reset it to say you started back at 0. And here's the debug, I never use that. And here's the about, where you type in your email and you type in your password to unlock your version of FL Studio. Mine's already unlocked. So you can see here, registered to Game King, blah, 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 1, 2, whatever. Okay, so those are the tabs of the settings. Again, to get to the settings, you go to options and click on any of these buttons up here, and it'll lead you to the general settings menu. So that's the boring part, the settings. But the browser, hopefully you learned some quick tips you can take away from the browser to quickly search through. So now, away from the boring stuff, let's get to the step sequencer. So the step sequencer is this block of blocks that you see here. So this sequence of blocks that you see here is called the step sequencer. Now they have different names for it, and we're just going to continually call it the step sequencer because it helps us, keep these names in mind. So what's new about the step sequencer? What do you need to know? What you need to know is that this is how you manage your sounds in the, let me see if there's okay, so it even looks like, oh, here we go. Okay, I was just checking something. So in the step sequencer is where you add your sounds to basically create your beat. Okay, you have to have your sounds in the step sequencer. Even if you drag them into the what's called the playlist, they're still going to be added to the step sequencer because of, or they might call it channel rack. I should probably call it the channel rack. So even if you drag stuff into the playlist, it's going to be added here. So despite if you add it manually, thinking it's going to be there, or if you don't add it manually, it'll come here anyway. So this is where all your sounds are going to be as far as when you add them to your track. So how do you add sounds to the step sequencer? We see here we start with a kick, we see a clap, a hi-hat, and a snare. So how do we add sounds to the step sequencer? Let's do that from the Fire Drum Kit. So let's click on the Fire Drum Kit, and it's going to open up these sounds. Okay, and now we're going to click on, let's say, kicks, for instance. We're going to go through the kicks, and we can left click to preview the sound. So let's just preview some sounds. Okay, so that time there was because FL Studio has to read that whole folder, and once it reads it, it's pretty much good from there. So you left click and find the sounds. Let's say you want this kick right here, remind you of 50 Cent. Okay, now what you can do is two different things. You can do there are a lot of ways to insert this into the step sequencer or insert it to the playlist. But to keep it simple, you can either left click and drag. So we left click and drag the actual file, and I can overlap one of these sounds. So instead of the kick that they give us from the starter project, we can overlap that sound with kick 12, and it'll replace the old sample now with kick 12. Or what I can do is right click the sample instead and then go to open in new channel. Okay, and that's going to open this sound into its own sound block like we have here, kick, clap, hi-hat, snare. We can open a new channel, and then we X out, and then you can see it added a new sound selection here. Okay, so that's what we can do as well. You can either left click and drag it here. Even you could drag it underneath or on top of things, but the beware when you're dragging, because when you drag samples over top of another sample, for instance, if you accidentally left click kick 12 and you go over the snare by accident, then it's going to be harder to find that snare. Okay, so you can see we overlapped it by accident. There's no Control Z to undo that. Okay, even if we hit Control Z. Let's see if we can go to edit and go backwards. I'm not sure if they added this function, maybe. Okay, so there's no Control Z for overlapping a snare with a kick by accident. So to avoid that, I like to tell people to right click and open a new channel. That way, it's a whole new sample unto itself. You don't have to worry about any fine tuning on the sound, because that can happen as well. So that's the easier, less cautious way to do it. Just right click and open a new channel. Okay, so hopefully you learned something new there. Now the step sequencer is pretty complex. We're just going to get into what you need to know right away. When we start making the beat, we're going to go over the fine tuning of the step sequencer. Again, this is not a video about every little detail about the program. This is just about what you need to know to help you get started. So the step sequencer is basically like an old drum machine. Okay, it had a sequence of steps, kind of like an arpeggio. And when you add different sounds along that step sequencer, okay, you can see we can add blocks, active blocks. So what I'm going to do is add a kick and a clap on every spot. So I'm going to start off with a kick and add a clap on these red dots, which are usually the best spot to add claps and snares, depending on your tempo. So let's go to the tempo real quick. Your tempo is BPM, or beats per minute, and it's the quickness of your song. It's how fast your song goes. Okay, so let's lower this to about 90 for hip hop, 94. Okay, and there are other options up here. We're not going to get into that because, well, you don't really need to know them until later. But just a quick overview. Okay, here's the metronome for those who want to stay in time. You can add that left click metronome up here. You can even right click the metronome and change the metronome sound to a hi-hat, for instance. And I need to turn it on, huh? Okay, so now you can hear the metronome. I'm just checking my audio to make sure we're okay. Now I usually don't do the wait for input to start playing. That means wait for you to hit a key on your MIDI keyboard before we record anything. The 3, 2, 1 countdown is basically a countdown to help you record MIDI when you have a MIDI controller. The blend recording is going to overdub any MIDI you may have already recorded before. This is for people with MIDI controllers. Okay, loop recording, again, is going to loop a certain section. The song pattern mode. Now here's where people get confused. So we see here, okay, song pattern mode. So what does that mean? Whenever you see this little thing here, that means song position. Okay, we can move that as we go to, you'll find that later when you're doing beats. But anyway, click here. When it's activated, it's pretty much the pattern view or the channel rack view. So that means you can hear your patterns. Okay, if I click that off and I hit play, you're like, okay, why can't I hear my pattern? That's because we're not in pattern or channel rack mode. Now we're in the playlist mode. Okay, and we haven't gotten into the playlist yet. That's number 4, but the playlist is this button here. Like I said, if you ever get lost, all you have to do is literally click these buttons to find your way back. Okay, you can't really get lost. But the playlist is this button here. We're gonna get to that later. And that's where when I hit play, it's playing in the playlist. And the playlist, to really capsulize the 2 different views, is that the step sequence or the channel rack view is the puzzle piece. Okay, now when we go to the playlist, that's where we build our bigger picture of the puzzle. So we start to add different puzzle pieces on top of each other to ultimately build a bigger picture. And that's the difference between the channel rack and the playlist. Okay, so the channel rack, again, or the pattern, whatever you want to call it, is the puzzle piece. The playlist is where we put the puzzle together. And that simple metaphor will help you understand how to use these two. Okay, so again, when that's highlighted, we're starting to hear the sequence. And we can hit play, stop, we can hit record. There are different records. When you want to record audio, you generally record, there's 2 different ways. I like to record into the playlist because ultimately if you record in Edison, you're going to have to drag it into the playlist anyway. But it helps you edit the audio. Does for people who know how to record in the FL Studio. For those with a MIDI controller, your best option, which is almost all the time, is automation and score. If you hit everything, that means even if you move a knob in your mixer while you're recording, that means it's going to record that as well. So you got to be careful with everything because it's going to record things that you might not even know are going on. So automation and score is generally what you record when you hit record if you have a MIDI controller. Here you have your tempo, again, BPM, beats per minute, the rhythm of your song. And these buttons you generally don't mess with unless you're very particular about how you record. The new multi-link controller button, if you have a MIDI controller active, you can basically, we'll get into that in the mixer because I found a cool technique in the mixer. So let me write a note here for the multi-link because I want to show you something in the mixer that's really cool and it's easier now. And this is probably my favorite new control. Multi-link in the mixer updates are my favorite controls. So that's why we're leaving that for last because we can do some really cool things. If you have a MIDI controller with knobs on it, it comes in handy. So like I said, the step sequencer, just to keep it brief, is about adding drums and adding sounds into a rhythm. Now we can also add, we can also add plugins to this channel rack. So there's either you can do the add channel and you can add from this list like you used to if you're used to FL Studio, or you can go to this button here and do it from this list as well. So there are many ways to add sounds. You can even right click in the step sequencer and insert plugins. So there's tons of ways to do the same thing. It's all about your workflow and what you need to do in particular. But let's just add the new channel and let's pick a synth or a sound generating plugin called 3X OSC, which is updated to look very clean and easier to understand for some people. Okay, so the step sequencer, before we get into what you need to do to build a sound, let's go over the general tabs of the sampler now. So the sampler, whenever you add a drum sample to the step sequencer, everything's in one. There's no 2 channel settings windows if you're from FL Studio 11. Everything's tied into one window, okay? So here we can see the sample and what we can do with the sample. We're not going to get into the specifics. We're going to do that when we get into the beat making. Under the envelope, you can see you can define your envelope. You can add an LFO. You can add a filter. You can set the root note for your sample. Okay, there's a lot of functions you can do in this tab, and keep in mind these are tabs within themselves. Just keep that in mind. And you can also go to the settings or the miscellaneous functions. Again, with the time, they change the names for the time offset. You can do time shift, how much of the swing affects the actual sound. So you could take certain sounds and take them off the swing mode, which we're going to show you next. You could do a lot of things. So we're going to get into that again when we get into the beat making video, because we just want to show you quickly how to do stuff. And then you'll understand it better when we get into the next video. So let's, at the top here, what you need to know is that the swing meters here, okay, this is common for a lot of modern, moving into the new era of song, we're starting to add a little more swing to our beats. So the swing meter, let me give you an instance of swing. I'm going to put kicks back to back. Now, when you hear the swing meter, it's going to be very obvious. Right now, I'm going to play it as usual. Now, when I add swing, you're going to definitely hear the effect of swing. So there are very minute time differences in the rhythm of this track, and that's what swing is all about. Now, you really want to be careful with the swing, especially in modern beat creation, but you can do whatever you want. I'm not going to tell you how to work the swing mode. Now, if we click this button here, it basically shows us if we were to do things in the piano roll, where would they be aligned? Now, I haven't mastered this button yet, but basically I look at it as a visual to help you understand. When you get more into depth of FL Studio, you'll understand basically what this means. It just helps you align different MIDI, in my opinion, because what happened before, you would have, we'll show you now. Before I go into what happened before, if you never even experienced FL Studio 12, you wouldn't know what I'm talking about. So anyway, okay, so that's how you add drums in a rhythm. Now let's go over adding sounds. Now, generally, I don't advise adding a lot of sounds on one channel rack or one pattern, because what that does is confuses you later on in the beat creation process. So whenever you add a new sound or a new pattern, you want to go to here, left click and drag to a new pattern. For instance, pattern 2, it's clear, it's clean, so we can start from 0. We can go to pattern 3, which is empty. You can right click and find first empty, and that'll direct you to whatever pattern it is, in this case pattern 2. That's a quick way to find empty patterns. Okay, so anyway, but what I'm going to do in this case is show you why I would use this button here. So to add MIDI or add sounds to your instruments, what you have to do is right click and go to the piano roll, which is the next step. Okay, so the piano roll, again, everything's updated visually. You can see here in the piano roll, we have basically the same functions. What I like to do is hit this maximize button so that we get a full screen view. And whenever this browser is in your way, you can always hit the button to hide it. So let's find the browser button. Let's just hide it. So now we have a full screen view of the piano roll. So what is the piano roll? Here's where you're going to add MIDI to your sound instruments. Okay, so you can left click and add notes. It's very easy, and compared to other DAWs, FL Studio definitely has the most easy to understand piano roll and the most easy to manipulate the piano roll. I think it's the best piano roll out of all the DAWs. It's very easy to navigate. So for instance, if I wanted to add some kind of chord, let's say A minor, which is ACE, and I want to just drag that chord out, I'm hitting Control, I'm left clicking to highlight, and I'm going to just drag it out for 1 bar. Okay, so that's what I'm doing here. Now I did that because I want to show you the step sequencer and this button here. So if we click that button, now you can see where these samples line up if they were sent to the piano roll, where they would line up according to the MIDI, okay, in the piano roll. So that's what that button, I use it for. Helps me align different things in the MIDI and tune some adjustments. So that's what I do with that button. Okay, so let's go back to the piano roll. If you want to go back to the piano roll, again, you can always click this button up here, or you can just left click whenever you see these green bars. You can X out, or you can right click and go to piano roll. So there are many ways to do the same thing, and there are different times you would use different things. Okay, so now inside the piano roll, we're going to go over the things you need to know, okay, because there's a lot of functions that you're not going to need to know right away. So right away, what you need to know is that you can left click in notes if you have this draw tool on. Generally, I suggest the draw tool, not the paint tool, or the paint plus tool, because it just gets sloppy sometimes. So just use that draw tool and left click in your notes. Okay, now let's say you want to adjust the velocity or how loud a note is. You can hit Control, left click, and drag. When you hit Control, left click, and drag, you'll highlight that note in particular. What we can do from here is if you don't see this bar at the bottom, and let's say your screen looks like this, there's going to be a dotted gray bar down here. You just want to double click it, or just left click and drag, I should say, and pull it up. You're going to see here a velocity window. Now this window may be changed if you messed around with stuff. So to change it back to velocity, we're going to go up to this bar, click here, go to note velocity. So that's going to let us allow us to change the note velocity. And we can lower this note down in velocity. Notice that bar shows us how much velocity we have for that note in particular. Okay, so we can judge how hard individual notes are based on looking at this screen instead of looking at the bars down here. So that helps us in a different way for more intermediate to advanced users. Know what I'm talking about there. Okay, so now we have different velocities for different sounds. If I hit Control, left click, and drag, I can make this note half as loud. Okay, so we have one note that's really low, the next note that's half as loud, and then the next note that's all the way up to 77%, which is the average percentage you want to use for your MIDI controller, 77%. If you have it at 100%, it's going to play very loudly and might accent some sample textures in your stuff. So keep it around 77% generally. Okay. So that's the piano roll. You just hit space to make the song play, and space to pause it. All right. I'm trying to think what else is in the piano roll that you need to know. So we have the snap to grid function, which is very important when you get into our beat lessons. We're going to be using this button a lot. Snap to grid is going to be your, again, snapping to the time grid. You generally want to have this set to a half step. I found that's the easiest time snap grid selection, is a half step. It gives you enough micro spaces and enough snapness to help you accomplish what you need to accomplish. So set your snap to grid to a half step. And if you really want to fine tune, go to a quarter step. And if you really, really, really want to fine tune, go to none. Okay. We're going to show you that in a different video. Again, beyond the scope of this video, but important nonetheless. Now that's pretty much all you need to know about the piano roll. There's other buttons, but again, for beginner users, you're not going to really delve into those buttons because I don't even use them a lot. There's certain tools like the slice tool that I like to use a lot, but again, I'm trying to show you all the things you're going to need to know. So now that we went through the browser, we went over the step sequencer, and we went through the piano roll, let's get into what the playlist can offer. So before we get into the playlist, again, the metaphor we like to use is that the patterns are like the puzzle pieces, and the playlist is where we put those puzzle pieces together to create the bigger picture. So we need at least two patterns to do what I'm talking about. So I'm going to right click pattern, and I'm going to go to find first empty. It's going to pull up an empty channel rack or pattern. Okay. And now I'm going to add a different drum pattern, just something random, nothing scientific. Okay. Just something different than the first pattern. So now that you have at least two patterns, we can now go to the playlist button here, and it's going to pull up the playlist. Again, I like to maximize a lot of these windows. Okay. So from here, here's where you start to add your stuff into the playlist. So here's where a lot of people get confused. They go, okay, how do you add stuff to the playlist? What I like to do, okay, there's a button up here, and this is going to be your favorite button once you understand how to use it. Just right click this patterns button, this little piano with the pat underneath, right click it and select the pattern you want to add to the playlist. In this case, I want to go to pattern 1. Now here's where you can use the paint tool because it'll come in handy when you want to just left click and drag stuff out. So that's why you want to have the paint tool activated. Now let's say you right click on this top bar like I just did by accident. What you can do to get rid of that is hit Control, left click. Okay. So if you right click on that top bar by accident, hit Control and then left click to get rid of that. Okay. So I'm glad that came up because a lot of people might do that by accident. So let's say you right click pattern clips, go to pattern 1, and we just want to add pattern 1 to the playlist. So this is where your beat or your song is going to come into fruition. Here's where you start to structure your song. So after pattern 1, for instance, let's right click, and then we want to add pattern 2 this time. So we're going to right click, select pattern 2, and now we're going to left click and add pattern 2. So now we have pattern 1, pattern 2. Now the playlist window is similar to the piano roll. We have the same options: snap to grid, draw tool, the paint tool, and some other tools that look similar, right? So let's go to snap to grid. And the best option I like is bar mode. So put this on bar mode because it'll let you drag out, arrange your song or structure your song in structure of bars. And it's easier to stay on the grid that way. Okay, so just go to bar, snap to grid. And when it's activated, it'll turn green. I just noticed. Okay, so that's how you basically add patterns into the playlist. Now we're not going to go over extensively how to make a full song in this video because that's beyond the scope. But that's how you basically use the playlist to, write out your song. Let's say these were different patterns. I could, add different patterns all throughout the whole song, come up with different ways to arrange the song. And it becomes very fun from that point on, and very creative. And we can what I just did was hit Control, left click and drag, and then I hit delete to get rid of all the stuff. And it does that little action thing, like a game. Okay, so lastly, well, not lastly, because we're going to get into the new features soon. But lastly, out of the 5 easy steps, I know this is getting to be a longer video than what I expected, but I want you to understand, once you understand these 5 easy steps, you're going to understand the rest of the videos in this FL Studio week called Fleek. Okay, FL week. So lastly, let's get into the mixer. Okay, so what is the mixer, and what do you have to know? So before we get into that, again, remember, if you ever get lost, click these 5 buttons and you'll always find your way back to where you were before. And you can't really get lost if you just click those buttons. Let's say you wanted everything disabled except the browser. Except the mixer. Okay, so you would click on every button until they're fully hidden and you would pull up the mixer. Now this is what everybody's waiting for, all the FL Studio users, the mixer upgrades. And here's where the fun occurs for those who are returning to FL Studio. So in the mixer, we see, here's where all your sounds are kind of summed up into what's called a mixer. Here's where you can adjust the panning, the volume, the different effects you add on each sound. Now the question is, how do you get your sounds into the mixer? Because if I hit play on the pattern mode, some sounds are automatically directed to the mixer while others aren't. So let me show you what I mean by that. Okay, so the initial 4 sounds or 4 spots that were here, 1, 2, 3, and 4, those are going to show up in the mixer. But these next sounds are not going to show up in the mixer. They're going to show up on track M or master. So all these new samples are going to only show up under the master track. So the master track is basically the track which sums up all the sounds of your song. Okay, and if you don't have your samples routed to a mixer insert in particular, they're going to go straight to the master, and that means you're not going to be able to manipulate the effects on each sound. So to handle this and to send all these to the mixer so that they each have a mixer insert, you want to click on your channel rack. Okay, you want to just left click and double click, highlight all your samples and all your sounds. You want to open up your mixer from that point. Boom. And you want to click on insert 1 and right click. Okay, let's go to channel routing and then route selected channels starting from this track. What this means is it's going to give each one of these samples and sounds an individual mixer insert starting from track 1. So you'll know what that means after I click this button. So again, before we do this, go to your step sequencer for those who might have got confused. Left click, double click on your left click. That didn't make sense. Go to your mixer. All right. And we're going to right click insert 1, channel routing, route selected channels starting from this track. So now it's going to auto name and actually arrange in the mixer all of your sounds that you used in your channel rack. Okay, so even the synthesizer got its own spot. So now when we hit play in our channel rack, you can see now we can look at the volumes of each of the sounds. Okay, so that's really, it comes in handy when you get into mixing. So let's go over the general things you need to know about the mixer. Okay, we have a free mixing course. We'll leave that link below. So it'll go over, a lot of what you need to know about mixing. But for now, let's just go over the simple tasks, controlling the volume and the panning. So the volume are going to be these faders here, these knobs. See, as I pull this down, the kick gets quieter. And as I pull it up, it gets louder. Okay, so that's how you can control your volume. So any knob in FL Studio is automatable, and that's the best part about FL Studio. There's so much automation you can do. You can go crazy with automation. So if you ever want to automate things or make them change over time by themselves, you want to right click, create automation clip. Okay. So notice how I didn't go over automation clips in the playlist. We'll leave that for when we start to make the beat, because learning this stuff by itself is confusing unless you have it in context. And we want to give you the context throughout the week so you don't get confused along the way. So let's click. What was I doing here? Forgot. Oh, panning. So we can even pan. Let's pan the snare. Let's turn it down first, or the clap. I just did something by accident. I'm glad I did it. So you can see how the master was hidden away when I click this gray button here. There's a little divider, and when I click it, it hides stuff away. So I can even hide away, I'm assuming, the auxiliary sends too as well. So they have a new organization structure in the mixer. Again, very, a lot more options. It looks complex, but it's pretty much the same stuff that was in there before. It's just giving you some more functionality. Like if we if we hit control, we left click and highlight the tracks, I can highlight multiple tracks. And what that means is when we get into, mixing, you're going to know why that's important, because we can create what's called mixer buses very easily. And you can even hit Control Shift and click the tracks you want to click and deselect. Okay, so that's going to be in the mixing section when we get to that. But in this video, you're not going to use that right away. So anyway, let's pan the clap. Let's click on the clap. And you can even oh no, I must have clicked something else. Okay, anyway, click on the clap. And we're going to use this knob here that's labeled panning. If you're ever confused on what controls what, you want to look in this top left corner. It'll tell you what is currently selected. So that's the panning. So we're going to pull this to the left, 34%. Okay, a lot of people ask, what is panning? Okay, it's when you pull things left and right. Okay, so that's what panning's all about. And in mixing, panning has a big influence over the sound. We're not going to get into all that mixing stuff. I just want you to understand what the mixer's for and how you can send your tracks to the mixer so you can control the volume and the panning better. Okay. Now there's also buttons for reversing the polarity, swapping the left and right channels, stereo separation, which is more advanced for the advanced mixers. And then you have here just a quick overview. You're not going to understand this right away because you won't understand the concept until you get into mixing. But we have over here what's called auxiliary sends, tracks 100, 101, 102, and 103. And here there are dedicated wires. You can even see down here, these wires come out of this track, 4 of them, and they go to these tracks over here. And what that means is we can send a percentage of the clap, in this case, to an auxiliary send. And auxiliary sends usually have dedicated effects where we can add, let's say, delay, reverb, or whatever at 100% effect. And we can put a portion of the clap through that 100% effect. And that means we can send, let's say, 48% of the clap to 100% of the effect, which means we're going to get out 48% of the effect. And so this, in mixing, what that means is instead of compromising your clap with a whole bunch of reverb, you can layer duplicates of the sound. So auxiliary tracks are all about creating duplicates of the sound. And you can have a duplicate sound be fully reverb, whereas the original sound, the clap, will be dry. And combining those two, it'll sound like you have reverb on the clap, but in reality, there's 2 different tracks. And that's what auxiliary tracks are all about. Again, beyond the scope of this video, I just want to show you the 5 easy steps to FL Studio 12, which are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. All you have to remember, guys. And hopefully you took away tips for each of these sections. Again, it was not a video just to be technical about, the ins and, the fine tuning about FL Studio, because you learn that over time. You're not going to learn it in one video. You're not going to memorize shortcuts or hotkeys. But what you will remember is how to get started. And that's what I want to bring you today. And lastly, let's just go over some of the new features. Okay, so now that you understand all the 5 steps of FL Studio, again, the browser, which is that guy on the left, collapsing it, searching and refreshing your browser, and how to bring in under the options. You can bring in extra folders like the Fire Drum Kit, which is for free if you click that link below. Okay, you learned how to do that in the browser. Now in the channel rack, I got to remember to call it the channel rack, not the step sequencer. The channel rack. Okay, so here's where you draw out basically your drum patterns. And there's many ways to make it more complex, but here's how you draw out your drum patterns. You could have different patterns, pattern 1, pattern 2. All right, so the step sequencer is fairly simple. Now the piano roll, again, when you right click, go to piano roll, send you to the piano roll, okay, for that instrument or that sample. And you can draw out notes, you can change the velocity or how loud the note sounds. You can right click to delete. You can change your snap to grid to a half step. You can draw on your notes. It's pretty much all you need to know at that point. Okay. Now the playlist, if we click this button here, the playlist is where we arrange or structure our song. And that's where we can add pattern 1, pattern 2, whatever. But the quick way, if you accidentally hit something and you're not getting any patterns showing up, only automation or only whatever, you can right click this pattern button here and go to pattern 1, and you'll always find the patterns you need if you right click this button and select the pattern. Because sometimes when you're creating automation, it'll make an automation clip if you have it on automation. So just keep in mind, you want to click on that pattern, right click, and select your pattern. And in the mixer, we went over how you can go to your channel rack, left click all these samples, okay, highlight them all. You can go to your mixer, you can right click on an empty mixer insert, and you can go to channel routing, route selected channels starting from this track, and that'll link all your sounds directly into the mixer and name them for you. So you can control the volume, the panning, and any effects you want to add. So let's say I want to add a chorus effect on my clap, which I didn't do. So over here we have slots for effects. Okay, now under slot 1, you can click it and you can select any effects you see here. Now they're organized, unlike in FL Studio 11 and prior, they're organized for the type of effect it is. So you can see here delay, reverb, distortion, dynamics, filter, flanger, gain, miscellaneous, patcher, visual. So everything is organized for you if you ever get confused in the main view here. So here's the alphabetical list on this side, and here's the arranged view. So it does look like we have a lot more plugins, but in reality it's arranged and then it's alphabetical. So for those who like to look at the alphabetical list, and this is for those who like to look at genres and categories, if they're ever confused on what type of plugin does what. Let's go to flanger and let's go to fruity chorus. Okay, so now we have a fruity chorus effect. Now, let's say we want to add some delay to our clap, we can go to slot 2 and go under delay reverb and go to fruity delay 2. And you can change the settings accordingly. We'll get into that when we create the beat, but that's how you add effects to your sounds. Okay. Now we're not going to get into the complexity of the mixer because that's beyond the scope of this video. But what I want to show you next is a really quick tool, which is new, called the multi-link to controllers. So what you want to do is click this button. If you have a MIDI controller and you have a lot of knobs on your MIDI controller, like the complete control controller, click that button. Please tweak the controls you want to link. So let's left click, let's move this knob, and let's move our MIDI controller knob. Okay, so now when I move my MIDI controller knob, it's going to move the volume of the kick. And this is handy for a lot of DJs who have a lot of knobs on their MIDI controllers. So this can be a little confusing when you first start, but I found that if you click this button, here's how to use it, the multi-link to controllers. Click the button, then I'm going to move something. So you have to left click and move something that you want to modulate. Well, never mind, I'm not going to get into previous editions. So let's modulate the clap. Let's actually go to clap. Let's modulate the amount of delay. Let's see if we can modulate this. Okay, so we're going to move it, at least we're going to left click and move it. Then we're going to go to our MIDI controller and move the knob. So now you can see how the fruity delay mix level, I can control that with knob number 2, which I'm moving. Okay, so you can really become a DJ using knobs, and this is going to add a whole nother layer of creativity when creating beats. That multi-link to controller is very upfront, and it's easier to understand the linking. Okay, because before it was an arduous process of how to link different parameters, but they found a way to make it a lot easier, which is, it takes a lot of stress off a lot of producers. So that's how you do it. You click on that button. Remember to move something with your mouse. So you have to left click something that's automatable, some kind of knob. Then you want to move your MIDI controller knob. Okay. So that's what I was having trouble with in the beginning as well. And you can always take it off by left clicking that. Okay. So that's how you use that new function called the multi-link to controller. And I said I was going to leave that till we got to the mixer because I wanted to show you how you can use it to use knobs to control your Fruity delay and everything else. Okay, so let's go over the new features. We can delete content in browser. So let's say we want to go into the Fire Drum Kit, or let's just say, and we want to go to the effects, and we click on rain or something. It takes time to load up the sound because it's scanning it. Okay, and we're like, you know what, rain, I don't want you in that folder. You're taking up too much space. I don't really use you. So you can right click the sample and actually delete the file directly, and that'll delete it and send it to your trash bin. So before, you couldn't really delete from this browser. You had to go into the folder in Windows and manually go in and delete it. So that saves you an extra step. You can just right click and delete sounds. So basically, if you have duplicates of your sounds that you find, you can always right click and delete them. It's a lot quicker. Also, I meant to show you in the playlist how you can drag from the Windows, hit minimize. Okay. And what was I going to do? Oh, I was going to pull up the Windows folder. So let's say we have a Windows folder here and we want to drag some kind of audio into FL Studio 12. Trying to figure out how to adjust the screen here. Here we go. Okay. So let's say we have some kind of audio file we have in our folder from the Fire Drum Kit. Let's say we go to loops and we pull up some kind of loop. Let's do synth chords 1 or whatever. So what we can do is left click and drag synth chords 1 into FL Studio 12. Okay. So we can now, and this used to be able to, excuse me, I'm getting tongue twisted. You used to be able to do this in other DAWs, but FL Studio didn't have the function. Now they do. Just left click and drag the audio directly into the playlist. And now you have that loop now into FL Studio 12. And if I hit play on the song mode, you hear the audio. So that's a new way to import sounds directly into FL Studio 12. And that comes in handy for those who aren't too savvy with, or just want to test out different audio and they don't feel like going through the long process, well, not long, but the options, file settings, and going through your browse extra folders. They just want to hear a sound right away or a sample or whatever. You can just drag it into FL12. Okay, so for those who are returning, the add channels button, there's no channels anymore. It's just add channel. You can add the plugin that way. And there's a plugin, there's a pattern selector up here. So that's new for those who are returning to FL Studio. There's a new plugin view with settings already. So if we open up this is for a quick overview of those who are updating to new FL Studio 12. So let's say, remember, you saw how I just dragged the audio into the playlist. Now when I go to channel rack, I don't know where my drum kits are. And that'll happen for a lot of people. So what you want to do is either select this bar. They made it so it resets it back to the view. But if it doesn't reset, you want to click this drop down arrow and go to all. Okay, I like to have all. I like to see everything. But what it does is it separates the audio from the unsorted things. And anyway, just put it on all if you want to find all your samples and all your drum packs and everything that you added to the project. Okay, but if we click on the kick, for instance, the new plugin view is that everything's under one window, like 3x oscillator, everything's under one thing instead of two windows, like the channel settings window. So that's for returning FL Studio people. We showed you how to drag and drop audio files. We showed you the quick search VST folder. So that's new. The step sequencer, piano roll, no more graphic editor that used to be here for those who are returning to FL Studio. No more graph editor, excuse me, which allowed you to control velocity and a lot of things directly on on the step sequence or the channel rack screen. And we showed you the multi-link controller. So those are the new features of FL Studio 12 for returning FL Studio 12 guys. So I know this is a long video. We might even break it up into parts. I'm not sure how it's going to work out. But again, if you want that free fire drum kit from busyworksbeats.com, just click that link below. And when you opt in with your email, we're going to send you a link to a direct download and some more bonuses you get for free simply for signing up. So with some secret bonuses in there, and you also get the fire drum kit just for watching this video as our thank you for watching. And also we have a free mixing beginners course for those who really want to understand how to make their beats sound better in FL Studio. We have a free beginners course. We're going to leave a link below. So click that link below. And lastly, I mentioned for the audio interface and equipment questions, we have another video called the Home Studio Tour for music composers. And I think you'll get a lot out of what you really need in equipment, because a lot of people buy things they don't need. And we go through all the stuff that you're not really going to need as far as studio equipment. Okay, so again, this is FL Week, and Fleek will be the product coming out at the end of the week. So we're going to bring you a lot of videos throughout the week, getting you ready for Fleek, because that will be the pinnacle of this week when we release it. So click those links below and get your freebies. And thanks for watching today. Please share with a friend if you thought this was valuable, and please like the video so we can help more people out in the world. Thanks for watching today. It's busyworksbeats.com.